Կազմակերպութեամբ Համազգային Հայ Կրթական եւ Մշակութային միութեան Գլաձոր մասնաճիւղի գրադարանին 3 գանատահայ գրողներու հետ հանդիպումը տեղի ունեցաւ ապրիլ 14-ին Հայ Կեդրոնի Յ Մանուկեան գրադարանին մեջ։ Հեղինակներն էին Keith Garebian, Lorne Shirinian եւ Alan Whitehorne.
On behalf of the Hamazkayin Toronto Gladzor chapter and its Յ Մանուկեան library and bookstore, I'd like to welcome everyone to this very special event, bringing together 3 exceptional authors, very dear to the hearts of Canadian Armenians. Authors Professor Alan Whitehorne, Professor Lorne Shirinian, and Keith Garebian have contributed a wealth of literary work that is the embodiment of the thoughts, feelings, struggles, triumphs, and tribulations of the Armenians in the diaspora. Moreover, these 3 authors have contributed their works and their expertise in benefit of our collective pursuit for justice for past and present day injustices. As an educator, a former member of the Armenian National Committee of Toronto, and the co-chair of the Sarah Recording Center for Genocide Education, I have seen firsthand the positive impact they have had in our work. In support of genocide education, their works have been instrumental in Ontario schools for teacher professional development, and they have been read in classrooms across Ontario as an important medium in helping Canadian students to understand the plight of Armenians and the transgenerational impacts of the Armenian genocide.
Like all of us here, Dr. Whitehorne is a descendant of a survivor of the Armenian genocide. His grandmother was an orphan of the genocide. She was found wandering the streets, didn't know her name or her age or anything about her family. Since they didn't know her name, they called her Sirun. And she spent many years in refugee camps in various countries, and it was arranged for her and many other refugees to go over to the United States. On their way to the United States, they stopped in Alexandria, Egypt, and she was adopted by an Armenian family there. She ended up marrying a fellow survivor of the Armenian genocide, and they had their first child together, Bartuhi, who is Dr. Whitehorne's mother. Dr. Whitehorne's earlier academic contributions did focus on political science, and he was first interested in the Armenian genocide from the academic sense many decades ago. So I'd like to read an excerpt from an article that he had written called The Birth of a Genocide Scholar. So in this article, he wrote, "On one cloudy afternoon long ago, I sat down at the microfilm reader at the library at the Royal Military College of Canada in Kingston. As I turned the spools of microfilm, I proceeded to look at the old issues of the Toronto Globe newspaper, Canada's equivalent to the New York Times. I carefully scanned each column of every page, covering each and every day for the entire year of 1915. I wanted to see directly what Canadians had read at that historic time about the unfolding mass deportations and ethnic killings. After several days of research, I could see for myself just how much people knew over the unfolding day-by-day timeline. I learned a lot about reading those accounts, and having completed this personal research, I placed my notes and photocopies in a cherished file folder to be stored in my cabinet drawer. About a decade later, I saw an official letter to the Globe from a senior Turkish embassy official denying the Armenian genocide. In response, I retrieved the old photocopies and drafted a reply, pointing out the powerful headlines from 1915 that showed how much we knew even then. Little did I realize that it would be a pivotal moment in my career."
Last of the Armenians. I am the last of the Armenians. I am forced to leave my home and my village. When I depart, not a solitary one of my people will remain. Our property has been plundered. Our hallowed churches have been closed. Our cherished gravesites have been shamelessly desecrated. Our schoolyards, once filled with children playing, are now eerily empty.
Seeing Gharapagh again? Will I ever see Gharapagh firsthand again? In 2005, my own government did not even recognize the regime. Nevertheless, I went to Artsakh anyway. Now, a foreign government prevents outsiders from visiting the tiny, besieged territory. A mere 2 years ago, I had an invite from a foreign ministry official to lecture there. Today, I only write essays and poems about Gharapagh and participate in South Caucasus workshops. Will I ever see that special landscape again? I suspect not.
Given your strong contribution and efforts to the spaces of Armenian academia and literature, what message do you have for today's youth in the diaspora?
We need to draw on the analytical social sciences to explore causality. What were the factors? What were the sequence of events? And what are the outcomes? But we also need the literary arts, the more personal, the heart and the soul. So in a sense, we need both the mind and the heart to begin to address the magnitude of genocide. Now, we connect with others in a variety of ways, and often it's in the arts form that we reach more movingly than in the analytical, scholarly way, at least in terms of direct impact. And today, we see much more reliance on the power of film, videos, and even animation. Think of Aurora Sunrise, for example. Combination of documentary film and animation, but telling a very powerful autobiographical story. And so I encourage the youth to recognize that whatever we've done so far is still not enough. We need to do far more, but working together, we can achieve good and great things, whether our expertise is in the arts, social sciences, or both, perhaps. It's important for us to give back, not only in our community here, but also in the global Armenian community, and particularly in the Republic of Armenia. Thank you.
Lorne Shirinian is our most prolific Canadian Armenian author. He has published 32, you heard correctly, 32 books. They span a variety of genres and themes. It is not surprising that, like many other Armenian authors, the genocide, the search for one's identity as a diasporan, and the burden of carrying such a heavy history is a central topic of exploration in many of his writings. However, as the son of 2 orphaned children from the genocide, his experiences and perspective are quite unique. Most survivors of such a terrible atrocity cannot and refuse to speak of it. Thus, it's perhaps appropriate that poetry is the best avenue to learn of it, with few but impactful words that shape our imagination and emotions.
Outside Sultania, they killed my aunt, then my uncle, and my cousin. The next day, my 2 sisters were thrown off a cliff, where the river raged through sharp rocks. My father rarely spoke their names. Ashamed, he couldn't recall their faces. The lone survivor of his family. Ashamed, he couldn't recall their faces. He survived and was brought to Canada, where he measured everything in longing. He remembered how they waited at home for the madness swirling around them.
So many slaughtered, hope murdered, a future driven into exile. There is a map of mythologies, of towns and villages named only in tales. Once there was, and there was not, haunts us. A curse drove the people from their homes. Those who survived were scattered throughout the world. No one remained to mourn them. I've been here for 64 years, anchored by the dead weight of harsh history, and I am still waiting for release.
From my earliest days, I've been a publisher. I have been published by publishing houses and university presses, but there is something artisanal about making a short-run book come to life. The benefit of having a larger company do your book is that once your work has been accepted, The in-house editing team takes you through processes. On the other hand, it can take up to a year before your book comes out. I was a disruptor in the publishing system. I was often told, "You're publishing too many books." I responded that I had a lot of things to say and wanted to see them in print. Why should I slow down and lose momentum?
He has just completed the first draft of his 33rd book, a new novel called Troubled, murder story that involves two Armenians in the Don Valley near Pottery Road, where he grew up. You can look forward to it coming out this summer. So I'd like to conclude by asking a question to Lorne. As a student of language and literature, you have studied all forms of writing. And as a writer, although you started with poetry, you have also written plays, novels, a memoir, essays, critiques, and much more. Do you have a favorite form of literature? And how does the form of literary expression change how you write?
I like the freedom that a memoir offers. And in some ways, it's a lot easier to control than a work of fiction. There are so many things to consider in a work of fiction, what we call the connective tissue, dates, close, the dramatic arc, the arc of a character and the story. You have to keep in mind so many things, and when you finish it, you have to go back, oh my God, I forgot a date, and you have to go back when you work. But in memoir, at least I found, it's kind of free-flowing, and it's rather forgiving. Besides, who's going to tell you you're wrong?
Dr. Garebian, and I quote, memorialized in prose and poetry what his father had struggled to remember. In pain, he represented himself as a divided river beneath a bizarre zodiac. He gets the reader's feet wet by beginning his book with describing his father's death with intent to retrieve the provenance of his conflicted identity. As a reader, I was then taken by the current. He expresses that he and his father had long been spiritual adversaries, not always in a relationship of mutual understanding, and perhaps that relationship was simultaneously a source of complexity, post-memory, and as a result, a charge to identify his own understanding of what being Armenian means to him.
I never felt it confounding that my father had come from a race of merchants and traders, jewelers and soldiers. What I had been resisting was not Armenians per se, but my father's shadow, and once I realized this, I also sensed that there was a mysterious bond between me and Armenians. Atrocity is often magnified by the scale of statistics, but what need of 1.5 million bodies when a single, abandoned, anonymous child can cry out for rescue under a nameless tree in an unnamed geography of terror? That barely remembered sister of my unfortunate father reminded me why I am my father's son, a stranger to his language and some of his countrymen's customs, but an Armenian with eyes that sometimes have a deep-sea sadness and a soul across which the snows of Ararat blow.
As someone with a mixed Armenian and Anglo-Indian ancestry, who speaks, reads, and writes only in English, though I can speak passable French, I am one of a swelling number of in-betweens, that is, persons who can't seem to belong to one side or another, who cannot find a fixed place. I am between histories of affliction, between cultures that often misapprehend each other, between two languages, Armenian and Hindi, that I don't understand, between a birthplace country that is ebbing away in memory, and another, an adopted one, that is not always firm in its own identity.
What advice do you have for diasporan Armenians who are journeying to understand their own identity?
The wonderful paradox is this: the world can be shrunk by the convenient speed of technology, but the human mind grows and gets enlarged. If you claim you are the same now as before, you are stunted, stuck in the same place. Read books. Don't limit yourself to the web. I know this sounds contradictory, but there is much misinformation flashed around globally. Read good writers, difficult writers, writers who leave a space for reflection, writers at odds with your own worldview. Avoid easy works which give glib answers, stock responses that play sides. In my own case, I write always remembering the great poet W.B. Yeats's dictum: we make out of the quarrel with others rhetoric, but of the quarrel with ourselves, poetry. And, there is no pure form of writing, just as there's no pure race. I am a hybrid writer and proud to be one. Thank you.